My name is Brad. I professionally run a departmental training program at a big tech company in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Akamai. I spend my nights and weekends working with nonprofits doing cool ed techy things. And my goal in this presentation is to first talk about a couple things that I see as, let's not even call them problems, let's stay positive and call them areas for improvement, right, in the educational technology landscape, and look at something that one of these groups is doing to try and address these in what I think is a really compelling and novel way. And that's where this swag thing is going to enter. But all right, let's start following good educational practice. We'll start with a brain teaser question, something to get everybody thinking. Why do we keep treating learning like hot dog buns? Does anybody have an idea? Ooh, nice. Here's what I mean. You know, there's that old joke about how you buy hot dogs, maybe places in more sensible parts of the world don't do this, but in the US, you buy hot dogs in packs of 6, and you buy hot dog buns in packs of 8. And you cannot get hot dog buns in anything but packs of 8. You want a hot dog, or you want a hot dog bun, you buy 8 of them. Let's talk about courses. Courses are a bag of hot dog buns. And if a hot dog bun is a topic, is a thing that I want to learn how to do, a course is a bag of them, right? It's a whole bunch of stuff. Hopefully I want to know all of them, maybe not. Now, this is born of a scarcity model that is necessary. It makes perfect sense when we're talking about a brick and mortar school with live instructors, right? An instructor can only be in one place at one time to talk about one thing at any given moment, right? So we'll have this person be at this place and this time for this succession of days to talk about a series of related things. If you want to learn any of them, you better be there and buy the bag. Now in e-learning, we've got so much more flexibility, right? We talk about this brave new world of e-learning where you can take a course anytime. You can take a course from anywhere. Why do we still have to take the whole bag of hot dog buns? Why are we talking about e-learning in terms of courses? And if any of you are out there saying, well, I'm doing some cool thing that is much more granular, that's awesome. I'm not saying nobody's doing that. I'm saying not enough people are doing that. And I'm working with a group that's trying to do that, and we've run into some really interesting problems that come up. And so I want to talk about some of those problems and some of the solutions, hopefully without running out of time. So all right, there's another one of these areas of improvement, and that's what I like to call the existential crisis of the LMS. The good old LMS, it's been there for us for so long. It used to be our one-stop shop. We would use it to create content. We would use it to store scores. We would use it to host content. What happened? Well, what happened is there's been these trends toward decentralization. And now the LMS is a sad shell of what it once was. Like its arms have fallen off because we have portable formats for creating content that is LMS neutral. We have tools like XAPI that allow us to store scores in a central repository. We have LTI, which means that the content that is being displayed on your LMS isn't even necessarily hosted on your LMS. So what is an LMS for anymore? An answer, yes.
Sure, an LMS is the glue. It's the identity and access management that all of these other things go in and go out. It's glue. That's all it is. It's glue. Students, when surveyed, say they want a one-stop shop. They want one place where they can go. And it doesn't matter if it turns out to be maybe in parlance, it would be more like a mashup. It's a glue, it's a mashup. Students go to that one URL, and they're taken wherever in Wonderland you want them to go.
Would it be fair to say that?
And they don't want to know where. They don't want to know.
Would it be fair to say that gluing things together is kind of like federating them?
Yes.
Yes.
That's why I was sitting in your session.
All right, we're super short on time, but you raised your hand. What's up?
I stand at the same point as similar integration system. You have drivers, you have hard drives, and so far, but you don't work with them straight. You have some kind of user interface. You look at something and just imagine, okay, I can provide you API to Amazon storage and to upload file. Do you do this as a student? No. You want one part. I want to hoard my something. I want to do something. And LMS just provides an ability to organize courses. Like
an ability to organize. Okay, now what did you just say? An ability to organize courses.
right.
Should we really be organizing courses? What if we could organize at a little bit of a lower level? By the way, y'all are my favorite audience ever because you're totally...
Learning objects.
All right, so in this brand new, I've never seen this woman before in my life, I promise. So in this brave new world, right, we've got modular LMS neutral content. Let's call it LMS neutral hosting, LMS neutral records. Where does the LMS fit in? The LMS fits in on top, gluing it all together and being the interface for the students. Now, that leads to some kind of cool things. And this is another place where, even where we're doing this, I don't know that we're taking as much advantage of it as we could. So for example, Jane does an exercise, and that is reported to the learning record store, right? And so we now know Jane wrote hello world. By the way, that phrase there, actor, verb, noun, ring any bells? What does that look like to anybody? Okay, if you're not familiar with XAPI, XAPI is really, really cool. It's basically a nice little JSON, which doesn't matter if you don't know what that means. It's a nice little way of, it's a generic way of allowing a learning module to tell a record store, this person did this thing to this. Okay? In this case, Jane wrote, in XAPI would probably be past, right? The Hello World project. Okay? All right, now, next question. Why do we care? Seriously, why do we care about the fact that Jane has written Hello World? Are we collecting people who have written trivial programs?
I care because I want to be able to use all different kinds of things and not necessarily have to use one specific.
Can you elaborate on that? Well, you say, so the answer is I care because I need to be able to use all sorts of things.
But I don't want to have to know where all of them are or how to get into them or anything else.
But I want to know what Jane did, because our researchers are finding out that they can predict what kind of a student Jane is if they know what Jane did and can compare her to other people who are like Jane.
Okay, that's a fair point. And to be fair, I'm not saying we don't actually care. I'm not saying don't bother recording that Jane did this project. But I am trying to dig a little bit deeper from an academic level. In terms of, like, so I run a departmental training program. I am teaching people on-the-job skills. I need them to be able to go in and come out able to do their jobs. Why do I care that Jane wrote Hello World?
Well, maybe let's try to understand how you build your education process. You expect students to get some information and do some activities, and this way provide kind of their output, that they understand something, they understood this information, maybe do some exercises, some activities on your side, some quizzes, something like that. You provide their so you have input information to students, you have output information from students back to your system, and it's kind of proves that they can cut something, they understand the subject. And it's part of education, so I suppose that's why you should take care about why Jane wrote that.
Okay, so I'm going to actually, because we're so pressed on time, all right, lunch is after this, which is pretty great because I will talk till the end of time with anyone who wants to, all right? But I'm going to plow through here for the sake of getting through this stuff. All right, here's what I'm getting at with this. And you mostly, what I was looking for was in there, I think. The reason I care that Jane wrote Hello World is because Jane has demonstrated the ability to run a script and print a string. And this is what I care about, right? I am not trying to produce people who can write Hello World. I'm trying to produce people who can write programs that can do certain things. So we need this sort of layer of abstraction, this extra layer of abstraction between the projects and the skills that they teach. So I like to think of this like, if anybody played a role-playing game where you do stuff and you level up, right? And you've got this tree, this skill tree, right? And you earn experience and you build your way up through this skill tree. And yes, I made all of these up. Now, you can kind of imagine the academic version of this, right? And wouldn't it be cool if the student experience was, I am here for any node on that tree for which the prerequisites have been satisfied, and from there I can go to any of these. And again, if you've played a role-playing game before, you can probably relate to this on an extra level because there's that oh hey, 5 levels up on the tree, there's this really cool spell. I need to go, so I'm going to need to do this and this and this and this to get to that point. I'm gambling on the fact that there are nerds in the crowd at this convention.
An example for the non-nerds would be the K through 12 program called ALEX, which takes the entire discipline of mathematics, the things that kids need to learn, and puts it in a map like this.
Perfect.
Students can jump all over the place, earning their visualization as pieces of the pie. But they can go anywhere they can, and in fact, they can circle back. The software will tell them, algorithms you didn't do so well, so you need to go back to operators.
This is actually kind of exactly why I wanted to do this presentation, because I've been kind of dreading somebody doing exactly what you did and saying, oh, hey, did you know about this better organized group that's doing the same thing? And while that's kind of a hit to my ego, it's really good to know in the long run, right? Because this is all open education. This is a thing that we can go and work with and incorporate. Yes. So this is great. Some of what I talk about next might feel a little bit redundant. But I'm going to be talking about it in the context of a basic programming curriculum anyway. So, all right. What we need is this layer of abstraction. We need something that recognizes that the Hello World project requires nothing. It is an entry point into the skill set and provides the ability to run a script and print a string, right? And then we need to build that. We need to build off of that so that the hello name, that something that prints an arbitrary string, requires you to already know how to run a script and print a string and teaches you about variables. And because the great thing about education when it's done right is there's more than one way to learn anything, you can have multiple options here, right? Here's another project that has the same prerequisites but is a little more ambitious, prompts the user for their name and says, hello, your name, right? Which of these is the better project? I'm going to say,
It doesn't matter.
well, here's I'm sorry?
Once you get to the end.
But where's the end? This is another way I want to shift the way people think about this. Which is the better project depends on, are you going to write something that needs to know how to prompt the user for information from a command line interface? And again, some of you are coming from higher ed and K through 12. This is not a one-size-fits-all. I think there are elements of it that fit everybody, but I'm specifically coming at this from the perspective of a corporate training environment and a small tech school that I'll talk about more later. And in both those cases, I want somebody to be able to say, I either want to be able to say, I need this person to know these things, or I want someone to say, I want to know this thing. And then that's going to determine which of these is better. So let's bring this back to our federation here. So we've recorded that Jane wrote Hello World. What we really want to know is that Jane now knows how to run a script and print a string. And this is the beauty of XAPI and these newer tools that allow us to store information about who did what and what it means, right? Not a lot of people are doing this. There are some. I'm not claiming to be the first person to ever do this. But there's not enough people who are recording not just that this person wrote Hello World, but that this person has demonstrated competency in running scripts and printing strings. Because ultimately that's what we care about as educators, right? Unless we're really specific, a really particular trade school, right? So, what happens next? Well, probably Jane didn't come here to learn how to write hello world. Jane has a destination in mind, right? So just as we were saying, what we really want, the real potential of this federating LMS and coupled with a skills index and an LRS is the ability of the LMS to consult the skills index and what we know Jane already knows and say, all right, you need to learn the following things, and here are the projects that can teach them, right? If you do this project and this project and this project and this project, you will know everything you know to finish it off with writing that Twitter bot that you came here to learn how to do. Now, this wouldn't really work in the context of a brick and mortar school. And I would love for anybody to disagree with me about that after the presentation. But generally, if I want to learn to write a Twitter bot and somebody else wants to learn to write a game, we take the same set of computer science programs, a set of computer science classes, and about 50% might be relevant to what I want to do. And it's going to be a different 50% for each person. And that's just the nature of the beast. But when you're doing entirely self-service e-learning, which again, I'm not saying is the best way to do it, but in many cases is the only option available, there's this extra level of flexibility, and you can do this if we invest in technology that can make it happen. So let's look at a case study. Now, I'm going to be showing you some very, very rough stuff. This is some of the software. Some of this software is, the reason I was late starting this presentation is because I was busy writing a demo I was hoping I could show you. So that's how bleeding edge we are here. But this is a place called the Tuna Panda Institute. And it is not a hipster tech company named after a weird hybrid animal. If you were thinking to yourself, this conference is great, but what it's missing is a short lesson in Swahili, I am here for you. Tuna is a prefix that means we are. Panda is a suffix that means climbing, planting, or growing. And so Tuna Panda is we are climbing, we are planting, we are growing. All right? And they're a small tech institute in right outside of, well, in Kibera, Kenya. All right? So let's talk about what we've been up to there. I'm going to now switch over to this here. So this is an IPython notebook. If any of you are developers who write in Python and don't use IPython notebooks, seriously check them out. They're very, very cool. I was going to turn this into a nice slide deck, but I did not have time, so we'll just look at it. And is that a little bit out of focus? Can everybody see that okay? I don't know what will happen if I increase the font size. Yeah, it looks all right. I think I could swear that is a little bit out of focus. Any complaints? Can people see that okay? Okay, all right. So this whole thing started with a project that Tuna Panda calls Swag. And the idea is that they are in basically a very low income area outside of Nairobi. And motivating students is really, really important because students have a great deal of incentive to learn and improve themselves, but they also have a whole lot of pressure to get out there and put food on the table however they can. And going to school is often not the best way in the short run to put food on the table. So they wanted to develop this system that has a rapid reward system. Right? And that's where we get to this notion of forget about courses. You do a thing, you get recognized. You do a thing, you get recognized, and you always know why you're doing the thing you're doing because it's where you're going, right? And the first thing we recognize is the need for this layer of abstraction between projects and skills. And that brings with it, well, okay, then we need a taxonomy, a way to denote everything a person can learn how to do. No big deal. And so this is an early approach. Like I said, this is very, very early stages. But here's an idea. We've got hello world here. And notice up here in the meta section, I have this skill prefix and type prefix. Those of you who are familiar with XAPI will recognize these. XAPI basically uses essentially a URL as the unique identifier for things like types of projects and skills and things like that, all right? So we're just using our namespace to uniquely identify the projects that we create and the skills that we recognize. How cool would it be to have an organization that really knows what they're doing have a centrally defined taxonomy of skills, right? But we'll plant that seed and then move on. All right, so here we've defined hello world, and we define everything in terms of the skills it provides and the skills it requires. All right? This is a whole lot of work, right? It took me ages just to sit down and think about a basic Python programming curriculum in these terms and figure out, okay, how do we represent everything? What are all the dependencies? What are all the edge cases? But here's why it's worthwhile, all right? I'm hoping to demonstrate why it's worthwhile. This goes all the way from hello world up through a bunch of projects, you know, prompting for a name and printing it out, using if statements to vary your response based on the input that you get. Oh, and notice this one has the verb extends. Modular learning content is nothing new, right? Modular learning content can also be a huge pain in the butt because, to my programmer mind says, oh yeah, great, everything is this tiny little box and they all fit together. But if you've ever tried to design content where everything you say has to be about one subject and you can't refer any other specific thing you've talked about, that's dumb. So we build this with the notion of extends, which is this project specifically builds on this other project. Most of the time, you can do any project that provides the skills that this one requires. But some projects, you have to have done that project. Otherwise, you won't have the thing that you're going to be adding to. Make sense? Okay. So we take these ideas and we basically wrote a thing that parses them. All right? This is going to, we have this library, and the version you're seeing right now isn't on GitHub yet, but it's going to be as soon as I push what's on this laptop, basically. So we read in the swagifacts. Oh, sorry, I should say swagifacts. So we've been trying to use this cute swag theme for the names of stuff. A swagifact is a swag artifact. It's basically a project, something that can constitute proof of having learned a skill. All right? And then now that you've got this in here in all these relationships, you can represent it as a graph. And I don't mean a graph in the Excel sheet. I mean you can hand this to a computer and say, turn this into a literal map. And it's not real pretty yet, right? We can work on that. But you can start to see that you start here, right? This is zero knowledge. And here are the things you can learn. And here are the things that they'll teach you. And here are the places that learning those things can take you. Oh, but it gets better. What you've got here is a dependency graph, right? For those who don't, you can probably infer what that means, right? Okay. Wouldn't it be cool if you could solve the dependencies on a specific destination in the map? And the criterion that we're using for this is I want to build a map. I want to build a path from here to here, all right, that incorporates the fewest required skills that aren't in the list of skills I want to know, right? I either start with a set of skills I want to learn or either a set of skills I want to learn or a project I want to be able to do, which implies a set of skills, right? And we try to find how do we get you from zero to there, incorporating as little stuff that you don't care about as possible. And the best news is, as much credit as I would like to take for this, a lot of this is already done for us, right? Shortest path algorithms, this is literally how Google Maps works, right? So here's our dependency solver. And for this first pass, I added this max loops option. And that's just going to limit it, so it's only going to do the first pass to show us that, all right, so it's building a lesson plan, and I'm telling it to try to build a lesson plan to the simple menu project. And the simple menu project depends on being able to print output, create a function that returns a value, create a function that takes arguments, take input from the command line prompt, and so on. All right? So first pass through, it looks at all those and says, okay, well, this project can teach this skill, this project can teach this skill, but this project can teach this skill. Each time it does that, those projects have required skills. And so the set of required skills has gotten bigger, and not all of them have been met, right? So we say, okay, now we've got What's Your Name project, which we pulled in to provide these skills, requires knowing how to set a variable, which, okay, technically that should have come earlier in the curriculum, but whatever. So we've now got a graph like this, where we've begun to build a path from A to B, and we recognize that we need to go through the What's Your Name project in order to learn how to prompt the user for information. But in order to do that project, the student needs to know how to set a variable. Okay, so we need to solve for that. How do we teach them how to set a variable? Well, there's two possible ways. There's this simple Hello World with Variable project, and then there's a project I've entitled A Questionably Designed Project, which for some reason requires you to know about nuclear physics, music theory, and 3D modeling in order to learn how to set a variable. It's a bit of a contrived example, I'll grant you, but roll with me, all right? The test case here is, does the algorithm correctly identify the right path? And by looking at everything in terms of, well, what do each of these options depend on, and how relevant are those dependencies? Spoiler, it does make the right decision, and in 2 passes has built us a path from A to B that is as efficient as possible. Now, there's obviously probably lots of room for tuning the algorithm and all that stuff, but it's a proof of concept, right? We then have this notion of a reporter, which are scripts that we're writing that can evaluate a project and report the completion of the project to an XAPI LRS. Now, why not do that with an LMS, right? Lots of LMSs support XAPI, and that's great, right? If you're doing a web-based lesson that's in the LMS, sure, fine, awesome. But, well, for example, Tunapanda does touch typing lessons using a tool called Ktouch, which is a GUI program in Linux. It's really, really nice. There are JavaScript-based ones, but this one's better. And it stores detailed records about this person got these keystrokes right, these keystrokes wrong, percentage, yada, yada, all in a nice little XML file. So why limit ourselves to web-based content? We write a little tool, we have written a little tool that parses that, recognizes the accomplishments we care about, reports it to the LRS. And in another component that unfortunately I can't quite demo for you yet, that then looks at the projects a person has done, cross-references it with the index, and gives them credit for the skills that they have learned. And you end up with something like the student interface that we're working on. So here's our LRS. We've got, this is Learning Locker. We've got it running, just collecting a bunch of test data from reporters that I've been running. One of which is for a hypothetical Ktouch set. And then you get an interface like this. And again, there's lots of room for, we want to make it prettier and all that and have a nice force-directed thing that you can drag stuff around and all that. But I have done on this system the level 1 and level 2 Ktouch exercises, which have been recorded in the LRS and are now filled in on what we call my swag map, right? And this is actually, this was one of the first things that we developed. So you can see that here, this is kind of project-oriented. It doesn't explicitly include the skills. What we want to have is obviously, you click on level 1, and up pops a thing that tells you what skills it requires, what skills it will teach you that you care about, right? And links, or a link to or instructions for how to actually do this thing, right? That's the next thing that we need to do, is have this read from that index of experiences. And I think that actually pretty much does get us both a little bit past my allotted time and to the Q&A section. I don't care if you don't. So anybody who wants to hang around and ask questions is more than welcome to. Actually, while I'm at it, I want to show one thing. So this is one of the things that we're working on. So the coolest thing about open source projects is I discovered Tunapanda when they were doing a fundraiser 2 years ago. I started out working on some automation stuff for their computer labs and ended up getting involved in the formative process of Swag. And since then, first, like this thing here was written by a guy named Mika, who dropped out of the sky from Stockholm and was like, hey, this looks cool. Oh, hey, here's a swag map viewer. And now I'm going to fly to Nairobi and teach Cecilia, one of your star students, more about how to program in Node.js, and we'll move from there. And then this guy, Jake from the UK, has been involved, and he then said, hey, that thing Mika made is cool, but wouldn't it be neat if we had a little more flexibility with the layout? And so he has this. And if you feel like you have something to add to this, come and talk to me. We are Tunapanda on Google Groups. We are Tunapanda on GitHub. And I am username number pretty much everywhere. Okay, so with that, if you want to go, you're welcome to go. But I would love to hang around and talk. Please Q&A. Yeah, what's up?
So I got probably according to your description that you want to get rid, or not get rid, but you want to implement other structures and web pages or something. You mentioned Linux console, you mentioned all this about being able to program something, and I have not got how you're going to understand the student reach this result. Is it kind of demo which listen to SSHD in Linux, is something else? So maybe you're going to go from format of web page to format of self-learning tool for other techniques. Maybe it's like doing math or doing programming and so far, but you need to have some kind of special software, which you communicate back to LMS system and send this result and so far. So I haven't got this. Can you explain again, please?
Sure. Actually, first, a brief side note. I was giving credit to all these people. I forgot one of the most important people that I need to give credit to. Well, in addition to the founders, Jay and Mick, who I'm recording this, so I figure I should name drop everybody. But also, the people who are developing our swag maps and a lot of the initial content are the students at the Tunapanda Institute. Because one of the big things that we are trying to build on is student-created content. And so we're using the swag map not only as the goal for the beginning student, but the to-do list for the advanced student, right? Okay, so your question is how does information about this person has written this program get into the LRS? And the idea is, well, in fact, that's the thing that I was trying to write. And the idea is for Python. Python has a really nice set of unit tests. Why not take the student's code, run the unit tests on them, and based on the results, report them to XAPI. And because XAPI is awesome, you can include the complete output of the unit test and the source code if you really want to.
But I can, as a student, write so terrible code, it will still report everything well, but it will be, I want to avoid this word,
Sure, and then the student does get credit for anything. If their program crashes, if that's what you're saying.
It will output what is required, but in the architecture and the data.
Okay.
And it will become a much difficult thing. So, unit tests just get input and compare output with expected result. But you provide a 2% certificate that this person knows Python, for instance. PHP, JavaScript doesn't matter. But you never saw its code.
Okay. So there's a couple of ways to approach this. One, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, there's only so much. There are limits to what you can do with automation, but there are lots of people who are working on pushing those limits back with machine learning and more intelligent. You look like you've been wanting to say something relevant to this. So yeah.
I think that this is really about understanding the competencies that you want to achieve. Or as an instructor, either way. So the better that definition is, the more precise this mapping can be.
Yeah.
And these concepts work really well. I mean, for instance, there's the idea of learning maps that was pushed to the K-12 community by the Gates Foundation, basically during the Illuminator Prize. I mean, that was one of the star features of that entire set. So this is applicable to all of it, not just programming, but it's really about the competencies and understanding what the scenario is to measure proficiency in that competence.
Yeah.
I do think that certain disciplines have discrete exercises that can more easily be mapped and sequenced to have a larger competency, which is why the ALEX system did it for math so so soon, and why programming would be an obvious path.
Well, I mean, but the point he's making is that past a certain level of programming, you get into to the science to art balance changes, right? And the same thing's true of math, right? When you get sufficiently advanced. But even where even where software still doesn't quite cut it, where there needs to be a human element, I'll give you an example from Akamai, actually. So I work in our network operations center, right? I run the training program for them. And this is basically whenever something goes wrong on the hundreds of thousands of machines we've got all over the world, a little light goes off in the NOC and somebody deals with it. And they record everything they do in a ticket. And we have a QA group that reviews those tickets. Actually, sorry, we don't have a QA group. We have a QA guy who reviews tickets for every NOC worldwide. It is not a great job, and we're trying to make it more great. One of the ways we're doing that is they've actually written a machine intelligence to look for obvious and machine quantifiable problems, like, for this analogy, program crashed, right? That's obvious. A unit test can catch that. Misspelled hello, a unit test can catch that. And the goal is not for the program to be the be-all and end-all of determining the competence of our NOC people. It's to reduce the signal-to-noise ratio that the human who has to look at stuff gets so that they can do a better job and everything improves across the board, right? So I acknowledge that there can still be a need for a human element. This still helps. This still matters. Yeah?
So the problem is that you don't want to get rid of educator in this process, just his work of educator.
Well, I mean, ideally, so the question is, so you don't want to get rid of the educator, just kind of change the role of the educator. And no, I mean, I don't want to put myself out of a job. I don't want to put you out of a job. But again, like, think about where Tunapanda is coming from. This was started by two guys, and they've now got a staff of former students. But both learning and teaching resources are thin on the ground, right? Another reason this whole Federation thing came up is they're literally using whatever freely distributable learning content they can find. This Moodle thing, this edX thing, this Certi thing, and so on, right? And so we rely a lot on mentorship. And we rely a lot on anything that we can do that can let a small teaching staff help people learn effectively. Not because we wouldn't love to have a one-to-one teacher-student ratio, but because we can't have that, right? Anybody else have? I love your engagement, but I want to give anybody else a chance. All right. Anybody else questions? Yeah, we can talk, and yeah, I would love to hear from any of you, even if you're here to tell me how we're doing it all wrong. Ultimately, that will be useful to us. Yeah, thank you very much.